All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for our town hall today. I am lucky to be here with Representative Brianna Titone and Senator Rachel Zenzinger, and we are going to mostly give you an update on the budget today. We've got Representative Julie McCluskie with us, and she'll be on later. But right now, what we really wanted to do was just kind of go into some details on what we've been doing this session so far. So I'll go ahead and just kind of kick us off, and then I'll punt it over to my colleagues. So I just kind of wanted to go over the bills that I've had that have gone through committee so far. The bills have all been bipartisan. I worked with a Republican on all of these, and they've gone through committee unanimously, which has been really, really exciting. I actually, in the first full week in my while I was in the legislature, I had 3 bills in committee. So that was quite the first week for me. My first bill I had in committee was my family law jurisdiction bill. So in this one, the Colorado Supreme Court ruled that district courts lose jurisdiction over parental rights cases that are currently being appealed. So this bill gave jurisdiction back to district courts with regards to parenting time, decision-making authority, child support, and maintenance. So that was really important to me because I think it's really important for kids, especially families, to be able to have flexibility. And when cases are tied up in the appellate court process, it can take 9 months to a year. So again, that one passed unanimously through judiciary. I was able to actually vote on that myself because I am on judiciary committees. So that was great. And then I had a bill with the Colorado Education Association that allowed ESPs, education support professionals, to take this biennial survey. We had a lot of testimony from ESPs about how they wanted their voices to be heard and how they wanted to be part of this survey process. And so this allowed that to happen. And that I also worked on with Representative Bradfield. She's a Republican who used to be a teacher. So that one was a bipartisan bill, and that one passed unanimously through committee as well. I had in judiciary, I also had a juvenile sentencing bill where we made sure that whether a juvenile was direct filed or transferred in a case, that they would be subject to the same sentencing guidelines. So as the drafting stood currently, if a juvenile was transferred, they would be subject to mandatory minimums. And if they were direct filed, they would not. So we thought it was really important, obviously, to be treating juveniles the same in sentencing guidelines. And so we were able to fix that statute as well. And that went through judiciary unanimously. Both that bill and my family law jurisdiction bill also went up for second reading a few weeks ago. So I was able to vote on my first bills, which was really exciting. And I believe both of them also passed unanimously through on second reading. So that was a really exciting first week for me. I learned a lot. And so I'm kind of getting in the swing of things. You know, I had the bill I'm working on with Senator Zenzinger was up this week on Tuesday. It was the foster youth and transition bill. And that one was just really, really exciting. That has been a work in progress for years and years and years, which we heard in testimony. We had a lot of foster youths testify about how they wished that they would have had these services when they were going through the system. And what this allows is it allows for foster youth who've opted out of the systems to opt back in through a petition process in order to continue to have access to services. So as a guardian ad litem, I see kids all the time who, they reach the age of 18, they think that they know it all and they want to try it on their own. And unfortunately, they leave the system and they lose all their services and they can't opt back in, but now they can. Well, at least we're still working on it. Senator Zenzinger will do her part in the Senate and we'll get this through soon. So that one was really exciting. And then I just want to talk briefly about my suicide prevention bill. That one is up this week. So that one was brought up by a lot of high school kids. Unfortunately, the suicide rate keeps increasing. And unfortunately, a lot of high school kids now know or have a friend who has committed suicide. So the purpose of this bill is we're creating a grant program so that kids can bring in programs that exist that are out there already to their schools, and they can give trainings and access resources and that sort of thing. The kids are really, really excited about this, and we're planning on having quite a bit of testimony from high school students during committee talking about how important this is to them. So I was really excited to work on this one as well. And then I'll just say one more thing about one other bill that's coming up that I'm really excited about is it's limiting the detention of juveniles. So it's getting rid of cash bail for kids. And it's capping the detention number of juveniles detained at one time in the state to 215 number. We've been doing an extensive amount of stakeholding on this. So far, we don't have a lot of, just one or two judicial jurisdictions are giving us pushback, but we've been working on a lot of people with language to make sure that we're not detaining kids unnecessarily. Because what happens when kids are detained unnecessarily is they can pick up real charges if they get in a fight while they're detained, if they, hit a cop or something while they're detained, and then they're looking at a felony. And so the whole point of this is let's keep kids who have nonviolent offenses out of detention. And again, let's get rid of cash bail for kids. So I'm going to stop there so everyone else has enough time to talk, but I'll I'll punt it over to Senator Zenzinger, and she can give an update on what's going on with her. Thank you.
Well, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for being here with us today. I had an enormously big week. The past 2 weeks, I've had 4 bills make their way through the process in a matter of 2 weeks and be signed by the governor. That's not normal. Usually when bills kind of work their way through the process, they take a couple of weeks to get through. And that's because they have to get both through the House and the Senate. And if they have an appropriation, they have to go through appropriations. And you will learn today a little bit more about that process and how it interacts with our state budget. And so for these 4 bills to come up, go through the House or the Senate, and then switch over and already be signed into law really speaks to the type of bill that they are. All 4 of these bills were either connected to the stimulus and to COVID and in response to the pandemic, and or they had to do with school funding. Or the operations of our schools in the moment right now. And so these 4 bills are Senate Bill 53, which was our mid-year adjustment bill for school finance. Now, every year when we put together the School Finance Act, we do that in the spring, and we do that based on what we think will happen for the following year. We think about how many students do we expect to be enrolled, how many at-risk students do we expect to be enrolled, what kind of expenses do we expect our schools to face, and then we put together the budget. Every year, about the mid-year, we go back and we look at our October 1 student count, and we say how many students showed up and how close were we in our estimation of the budget. Normally that number is a little up or a little down, and school districts just adjust for that. And they usually, if they're down and they have to return money back to the state, it's usually a nominal amount that they can then spread over the remaining 6 months of their budget. Sometimes expenses were higher than what we expected, and so we end up sending extra money to schools during the middle of the year. This year, because of COVID, everything was different. It was much more dramatic than normal. It wasn't just a little bit over or a little bit under. We had approximately 30,000 students not attend school this year. We did not expect that kind of a drop in enrollment. In addition, we had a calculation issue with how we represent our at-risk students in the formula. So normally the way that we represent an at-risk student in our formula is we calculate the number of free and reduced lunch kids. And then we take that number, and if there is a free and reduced lunch kid, they're considered at risk. and then they received some additional funding from the state. This year, because of COVID, the federal government actually just covered free and reduced lunch for us this year. They didn't ask us to turn in those numbers because they were really concerned about students not eating this year because of the pandemic, not being in an in-person learning environment. And so on paper, it appears as if we had a dramatic decrease in the number of at-risk students. Unfortunately, we know that not to be the case, especially when you're in a pandemic or an economic recession. What history tells us is the number of at-risk students actually goes up significantly. So we had this problem on paper that was essentially going to claw back funding that we had already attributed to schools and school districts. The amount of funding that we were going to have to claw back due to the drop in enrollment, the problem with calculating their at-risk students, and the number of local communities that had a drop in their local share due to the economic conditions, we were going to have to claw back $121 million from our schools. And this was going to be exceptionally difficult for our districts this year. So what we did in the mid-year adjustment is we accounted for that. We made sure that we were able to hold districts harmless within 2% of their original appropriation. And we made sure that we were accounting for those at-risk students. And we found a way to administer some of the stimulus dollars that we pulled in mid-year as well. So that had to be signed right away so that we could get those monies out the door to support our students and our school districts. The second bill that was somewhat timely that was just signed into law on Tuesday was House Bill 1161. This was the bill that addressed our standardized testing in Colorado and whether or not we should move forward with standardized testing. We had a bill that was earlier, a version of that bill, 1125, that would have actually just paused standardized testing for this year. Unfortunately, we received federal guidance that said that we were not allowed to do that. So what we ended up doing was coming up with a compromise that just reduced the number of tests that we are administering this year to 1 per grade level for grades 3 through 8, excuse me. So while we weren't able to stop standardized testing for this year, we did recognize how difficult it's going to be to administer the tests this year because we are in the middle of a pandemic, and we were able to reduce the number significantly. We will also not be using the standardized test, also known as CMAS, for accountability purposes this year or for teacher evaluation. So that bill needed to get signed into law so that we could send off our waiver to the federal government. Right now, we're still waiting to hear back from the federal government whether or not we'll be able to move forward with this plan. So all of our districts right now are in a little bit of a holding pattern, waiting to find out if we will be granted that waiver. The next bill that was signed into law yesterday, actually, was Senate Bill 110. And this is a Main Street revitalization bill that was part of our transportation mid-year adjustment. So there was a program that came about last year in the middle of the pandemic that really took a look at those main streets that also happen to be a state highway. And there are a number of them. If you think about our community, Wadsworth, for example, is a state highway, and it does kind of, bisect our community and serve a little bit as a main street. But in other cities and towns across Colorado, where they literally have a main street that is a state highway, this program sent essential dollars, stimulus dollars to those communities so that they could work on making those main streets safer, and then also opening them up to our business community so that restaurants and other businesses could continue to operate outdoors during the pandemic. So if you think about Old Town Arvada is a good example, how they put up some barriers so that we could attract people into the downtown area, so that they kind of like a pedestrian mall, so that our essential businesses could continue to remain open during the pandemic. This was a very popular grant program, and what we did with this program is that we were able to scale it up for the entire state, so that other communities could also take part in this revitalization of main streets. So that was a bill that was just signed into law yesterday. It's approximately $30 million that will then go out in a competitive grant process. And then lastly, yesterday we made history by passing a Senate joint resolution. It still has to go over to the House on Monday, but it will send an interrogatory to the Supreme Court to ask them to weigh in on an important tax question regarding mill levies and mill levy equalizations in how we fund our public schools. It's a pretty complex bill, and I will talk a little bit more about it. I did introduce the topic in my newsletter last week, and I will follow up this week with a bit of an update on how that played out. So those are the 4 bills that have already been signed into law or out the door, and I'm very excited.
All right. Thank you so much for that update. Representative Tatone, how about you go? All right, let's hear your exciting news.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. I've been accumulating a few bills since the last time we met. When we went over our bills, there's a few more in the pipeline now. Many of them still haven't had committee hearings yet. So if you want to track those bills and watch them as they go through the process, you can listen to the committee hearings online. You can watch the debate as it happens on the floor for second reading as well. The next one I have coming up is a Senate bill that I'm on. That's going to be heard on Monday. That's for increasing medical providers for senior citizens, Senate Bill 158. I have a bill on recycling and composting enterprise, Senate Bill 180, with Senator Priola. That is going to be in the Business Committee at 1:30 also on Monday. I'll be presenting a bill on the Kidney Disease Task Force. That's a bill I'm running with Representative Bradfield on Tuesday at 1:30. I also have my really big, exciting consumer digital repair bill of rights. That's the right to repair bill. We're hearing that on Thursday, the 25th at 1:30. That one is going to be an interesting bill. There's a lot of information happening with that one. I'm doing a Ask Me Anything About the Bill or the topic on Monday on Twitter at 5:30. So you can join me and my soon-to-be co-prime sponsor on the bill, Representative Woodrow. We'll be talking about the bill and answering any questions you have about it. So if you're on Twitter, please tune into that. I also have introduced the Kiowa bill. That's the bill on HOAs and some new regulations in HOAs. We're still working out some more details about the alternative dispute resolution portion of that bill. We're hoping to have that done before the April 1st committee hearing at 1:30. So if you live in an HOA, this is going to be something that's going to impact you, and this is to give the people in the communities a little bit more power against HOA boards that are, frankly, making it difficult for people to live there. And that's not really the case with everyone. A lot of HOAs do fairly well, but when they don't, they can be pretty nasty, and people who live there really have very little recourse except for going to court. And we're trying to give people some relief in that respect, because going to court costs you money, and it can cost a lot of money. And even when you're right, you can still lose, and it costs you a whole bunch of money. So we don't want people to have to go through that. We want some of those disputes, whenever possible, to be figured out in a different way. So that's what this bill is all about. Another bill coming up is the natural organic reduction bill. I talked about this one a lot last year. This bill came out of the Senate, and this is that bill that will give you another option when you die. If you don't want to be cremated or buried, you can be turned into soil, and it's a pretty interesting topic. There'll be some media on that one probably in the next couple days, as that bill comes over from the Senate and we hear it in committee on the 1st. Senator Zenzinger and I are working on the Talking Book Library that's coming over to the House on April 6th. I also have a couple bills in drafting right now, which would work on state assets and how we can use those for better use. So if our state has a lot or a building that's not being used, we want to make sure we have the ability to use that asset in a productive way for the community. So that's a new bill that's coming up. Also, my broadband deployment board passed on second reading yesterday. We'll be going to third reading next week on Monday. So that will be the first bill I'm sending over to the Senate. That will be a good bill for getting rural broadband the relief they need, because broadband is one of the most important things that the pandemic has shown us we're lacking in infrastructure for, and we need to make sure people have access to that. Also, I have another bill that will create an internet portal for businesses, and that one I'm running with Senator Zenzinger as well. And that one is going to give us a place for people to go where there's rulemaking around businesses, different things that apply to business law that you want to know about for your business. It'll be one place where you can go find all that information in a real easy way. Because right now it's kind of fragmented, it's difficult to find things. And we're working on making sure that businesses have the ability to find those documents and rules that apply to their business to make it easier for everyone. I just got approval for a study for emerging water technologies for water management. That one is going to help us all the different aspects of water management. We're going to be able to get more information on that. I have another bill that's coming out of the Joint Technology Committee. We're restructuring the Office of Information Technology. This statute was put into place quite a while ago now, when technology was starting to emerge. A lot of that information in there is outdated. There's some information that needs to be stricken from the statute. So we're restructuring and updating the language on the entire portion of that administration. So that will be a pretty big bill. I did talk about the mental health wellness exam bill a while ago, and that was one of the first bills I introduced, and we haven't heard it in committee yet because there's a little sticky situation with federal government and mandates on health insurance. So we've been working with the Department of Insurance and the governor's office to try to work out how we can make that work and make it so that way we won't get a penalty from the federal government for creating a new mandate. We don't think it's a new mandate because parity was passed a long time ago, and you get a physical exam, so you should be able to get a mental health exam as well. But we have to keep fighting for that. And right now, with people struggling, a mental health wellness exam is really critical. So we want to make sure that that goes through as well. That's most of the bills that I've been doing. There's a couple other ones. I have another bill that they'll be working on, some sunset bills from the Senate, and a couple of things that are still kind of in the works that can't really talk about at this point because we don't have the details worked out. But I've got my hands full this year, but it's good to be able to do the work of the people and pass some good legislation to make sure that people are getting the things that they need done. So I think we're ready for Representative.
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to just introduce the commissioners real quick. Thank you so much for your update. Appreciate that. And we have Commissioner Tracy Kraft Tharp and Commissioner Dahlkemper here. And whoever wants to start, go ahead. How about Tracy? Go for it.
Hey, thank you. So good to see you all. It's a busy morning for town meetings in Jefferson County. The big issue in Jefferson County is, as you know, COVID and vaccines. So yesterday, 2.5 million people in Colorado became eligible for their vaccines. Some of you may be part of that group. And boy, oh boy, Facebook is full of frustrated people unable to get appointments. So here's a couple suggestions. One, NREL has a website that tracks appointments that are available, like at Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, King Soopers, and Safeway. So check out the NREL site. There is everything that you need to know about COVID and COVID vaccinations on the jeffco.us website. And then the third piece of advice I can give you is patience. Everyone's going to get it. We're going to be getting more supply starting next week or the week after. We now have at least 3 vaccines, so have some patience. Everybody else is not having fun. They are still inside. They are still wearing their masks, and we do need to do that. They are a little worried about another surge in the next couple of weeks, so let's all hunker down and make sure that we are safe from that. The only other thing I want to mention is that next Saturday at 9:30, want to invite you to the North Jeffco town meeting with talking about county issues, Arvada issues, and Westminster issues. And we'll be talking about single trash hauler. We'll be doing an update from public health on vaccines and Westminster Town Center. And then the fire folks are going to come by. So that's on Zoom. Tracy for Jeffco Facebook page will have the Zoom link. Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you so much for the update. Appreciate all of your hard work. And I'll turn it over to Commissioner Dahlkemper.
Great. Thank you so much, Representative Doherty and Representative Titone and Senator Zenzinger. It's great to see you and be with you here this morning. Commissioner Kraft-Tharp talked about vaccines, and we are now in phase 1B.4. So if you're 50 and up, please use that NREL vaccine finder. There's a link in the chat that I placed, and it's got everything you need to know in one location about vaccines, about COVID, and more. One other quick update for you regarding the county. Many of you may have heard about the American Rescue Plan. This is the follow-up to the CARES Act. Jefferson County is expected to receive $114 million coming directly to the county, along with $46 million going directly to cities like Arvada, Lakewood, and Westminster. What does that mean for Arvada? Arvada is looking at $10.8 million in additional funding. We work very closely with our state legislators, our mayors, nonprofits, chambers, the Arvada Chamber, and others through our economic task force to ensure that when these federal funds come to our community, we strategically push them as soon as we can into the hands of our cities, our businesses, our nonprofits, so they can navigate to the best of their ability COVID response and recovery. The funds are going to be spent through the end of 2024, so we have a longer runway than we did with CARES Act money, which had to be spent by the end of last year. We'll only receive 50% upfront and the other half in 2022, and the earliest we'll receive these funds is in 60 days. So look for more information to come on that front, and it's just a real pleasure to join you this morning. Thanks for the opportunity to share an update.
Yeah, thank you all so much, both commissioners for being on. And I know you've been working incredibly hard, especially given all the vaccinations and everything. So thank you so much. And I'm going to move us on to Representative Julie McCluskie, who joined us. She's a member of the Joint Budget Committee. Hi there. And she's going to give us an update on the budget. I've got just a very brief intro. She was elected in 2018 for House District 61, which includes, in her words, the 5 most beautiful counties in Colorado's Rocky Mountain and along the Western Slope. In her first session, she was appointed to serve on the Rural Affairs and Agriculture, Education and Appropriations committees. Over the 2019-2020 fiscal year, she was selected to chair both the School Finance Interim and Appropriations Committee. Most notably, she was honored to receive an appointment to the prestigious 6-person Joint Budget Committee in January 2020. So thank you so much for being on. And without anything further, I will hand it over to you. Oh, and I wanted to mention, so sorry, there's the Q&A function. If anyone has questions as we're going along, we'll monitor that. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Representative Doherty and Representative Titone, Senator Zenzinger. What a delight. It's so much fun to join town halls across the state and have a chance to meet new people and talk about the issues in Colorado that we all care about. I do have a few slides to share about the budget, and really want to raise up Senator Zenzinger, who was my compatriot on the JBC last year, and now she's taken the helm of the Education Committee, which is fabulous because we need her wicked smart financial expertise when it comes to school funding. So please, Senator Zenzinger, feel free to jump in as we kind of do the walk. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. Can everyone see? No. Let me go back. Oh, I see. It's, Let me try again. There, is that better? Can you see it now? Wonderful. Okay. So real quickly, just to talk, to frame our conversation for this morning, I want to talk a little bit, just the budget basics. Where does the money come from? Where does it go? What does the overall budget look like for the state of Colorado? I want to talk a little bit about what the pandemic and economic crisis have meant to the state, what we faced last spring, and what some of our decisions were around the state budget. I'll then talk about the overall process, how the state budget comes together every single year. It really is a year-round process. And while we're just coming up on our budget draft to share with both House and Senate members, it has taken months and months of work with our staff, the Joint Budget Committee staff, as well as our Legislative Council staff, the governor's staff, and many, many others. We'll talk a little bit about the economic outlook. We just received our March economic forecast yesterday, and then we'll talk about next steps with the state budget here in April. So first of all, this is one of my favorite slides, just to give you a picture of what the state's budget is made up of. This is our overall operating budget history since 2011. So really the last decade of operating budget dollars. The state assembly has the opportunity to oversee and appropriate the general fund dollars. Here included in this diagram, you will see that we have included not only those general fund dollars, which are the gray bar down here at the bottom, but we've also included cash funds, federal funds, and reappropriated funds. So every year, while our budget has been, roughly between 30 and 35 billion the last couple of years, the part that the General Assembly has the greatest influence over is this gray bar down here. And you will see that while we were a little over 12 billion in the 2019-20 fiscal year, we really took a significant hit and ended at about 10.9 billion for the current fiscal year that we are in. Our fiscal year starts July 1st and ends June 30th every year. So where does the money come from? On the left-hand side, you can see the pie chart that indicates where most of our money is coming in. It comes in from individual income taxes. That's the majority of what makes up the general fund in our state budget. The rest of the pie includes sales and use taxes, corporate income taxes, and then a number of other taxes on a variety of different goods and services. Our money goes out on the right pie chart, the gray pie chart. You can see that we spend a great deal of funding in health and human services. The largest amount of the overall budget goes to healthcare, our Medicaid and Medicare services. Education is a close second, and when we look at the general fund, education is the largest. It comes in at 36% of the overall budget. K-12 right here. So I love this bottom line because it's a great way to think about the state budget. Income taxes are driving the revenue. Our earnings and the amount of money that we pay to state income tax is what helps us build that base for state spending. But caseloads, that Medicare, Medicaid caseload, and then student counts, what we are spending in education, that's really what drives our spending. Another way to look at the state budget, and this by department, this is again a 20-year look back at how the state funding has been proportioned out by department. This light blue area is education. The gray bar is healthcare. That's our HCPF, healthcare policy and financing departments. This is K-12 education. Higher education is the lighter gray bar right here. Human services, the gold bar, and then judicial and BOC corrections come in both fifth and sixth. So those are kind of the big departments. You can see how many different departments make up the state budget. All of those, obviously down here at the bottom, a very small, minute part of that general fund. Here is where we have the greatest influence and probably the greatest responsibility. So in May of 2020, we faced an unprecedented and devastating both economic and health emergency here in the state. Senator Zenzinger and I weren't literally holding hands as we made a lot of tough decisions, but there were moments where our hearts were breaking. We ended up reducing program appropriations by over $1.7 billion. We took significant dollars from our public schools, K-12 sector, our institutions of higher education. We cut back where we could on some different benefits, including substance use disorder treatment, dental benefits. We completely eliminated any capital construction projects for the year. And then we took some steps to delay implementation of different programs. You can see a few of those listed here. We also took cash fund balances that had been accumulating over the past probably 5 to 10 years since the last recession, dollars that were available to us as fund balances that we were able to sweep and put into the general fund to help offset and maintain some of our needed ongoing operations. We refinanced programs where we could with federal funds and cash funds, and really truly did our best to maximize any of our general fund revenues through either emergency rules or through a couple of policy changes. I want to emphasize that while we took $3.3 billion, roughly $3.3 billion from the budget last year, we did so with some core democratic values in mind. We were about protecting our most vulnerable citizens, our working families, doing everything we could to protect housing and food and utility assistance programs. We also, while we took a great deal of funding from public education and higher education, we did that knowing that there were federal dollars coming in to help offset those cuts. And while that was only for the current year, the year that we are in at this moment, we knew that if we could make those cuts, offset them with federal funding, we had that opportunity with economic stimulus and economic recovery in mind, be able to restore those cuts here for this next year. So it was difficult. I think I really commend my colleagues on the Joint Budget Committee and certainly Senator Zenzinger, because while those decisions were tough, I think it put Colorado in a really strong and solid place for our future fiscal health and survival. And we're facing some very positive opportunities right now because of the difficult decisions we made last spring. So as we look at the budget for this next year, fiscal year 22, we have been focused on restoring a lot of those reductions and continuing to ensure essential services because, and I'll speak about our economic stimulus package in just a moment, because we were so prudent and really tightened our belt and made some of those deeper cuts, revenues have come back in a bit stronger than anticipated and are allowing us some one-time dollars to invest in a strong economic stimulus package. And we're also very thoughtful about putting dollars away for the future, making sure that we're investing now to protect ourselves for the next 3 to 5 years as we come out of this economic crisis. The stimulus is really about how do we leverage one-time dollars that we have now to spark and advance economic progress for all working Coloradans, to get people back on the job, to make sure that people are able to get back to a living wage, make sure that they're able to pay for those, basic needs of housing, food, and energy, and do what we can to get Colorado's economic engine chugging along and really back on track. This is our budget timeline, and I share this just to give you a little bit of context. As I said, budgeting is a year-round process. In November, the governor presented his budget for this next year. The Joint Budget Committee then starts by going through a number of briefings with our JBC analysts, and then we listen to every department. We go through department hearings between November and January. We look at some supplemental requests, which we just completed a couple of weeks ago. Those requests are really true-ups in our budget. Where did we have an emergency or a need that we hadn't anticipated? Maybe we spent a little more than expected or saved a little more than expected, and how do we true up our budget? We're through that process now, and we have just completed our figure setting. So we have gone through as a Joint Budget Committee and basically made decisions on how much we should spend on every department, division, and line item in the state's budget. Next week is when we will start trying to balance that budget. We'll take a look at our economic forecast that we just saw yesterday. We'll see how far off we are from the projected revenues that we're hoping for. We'll make some additional decisions. And then in April, probably that first week of April, the Senate will bring forward the budget for a presentation to go through the Senate. Once approved, it will go through the House and then be finalized for the governor's signature, hopefully by the end of the month. I want to point out just a couple of good news items. So yesterday we did receive our economic forecast, and it really looks like we are bouncing back even better than we'd anticipated. While there is still some risk, certainly with the disease and getting those vaccines out and getting people back to work, getting businesses back at full capacity and running strong. This is currently what our legislative council staff has projected as both what the impact was for us and where our projected growth will be here in the next couple of years. Additionally, we want to be very mindful as we move into our budgeting process that our high income earners, while all of us saw a challenge during last spring, March, April, and May, our high income earners have really come back the strongest. It's our middle and low income wage workers, our low income working families that are struggling to get back on track. And even as you look at this graph and you see the percentage change in their employment, and loss of income since last year, it is startling to see the difference between low income and high income. And I think that really speaks to the different sectors of our economy. We know that our hospitality, tourism, restaurant, food and beverage sectors of our economy have been hit the hardest, where so many of those lower wage positions exist in our system. And so getting those restaurants back open, getting the mountain resorts back open, and everywhere in between is just critical to being sure that we're getting ourselves back on track. Yesterday's, this bar chart probably being one of the most exciting, yesterday's general fund budget demonstrates to us that while we did a good job tightening our belts and really did a nice job in appropriating dollars that we were confident we would have, we ended up with a surplus of general fund revenue. We ended last year in June of 1920, we ended with more revenues than we had originally projected. Since then, in September, December, and now March, we've had additional updates to our revenue forecast. And each time we're demonstrating that we're coming back strong, that we're doing better than we had originally anticipated. The good news is that you see we have additional revenue to spend or save. I think a lot of those dollars will go to restoring the cuts that we made last year. Remember, we took $3.3 billion in reductions, delays, and suspensions. We're also going to look to putting a significant amount of funding into our reserves. We are down to just 2.86% of our general fund appropriations expenditures as part of our reserves, which leaves us just $300 million. Many of our analysts and partners in the budgeting world are recommending anywhere from 13 to 15%, so roughly 1.7 billion to be put into our reserves just to help us get through this next operating year and through FY23, fiscal year 23. So, you know, as a kind of a conclusion, we will continue to hold strong to the values that mean so much to us. Really proud of how hard both Republicans and Democrats have been working together in a bipartisan way to look out for working families and Coloradans, making sure that we're taking care of people in this difficult time, whether that be with healthcare, Medicaid, and our CHP Plus programs, but also those essential services, food, housing, utility, and of course, unemployment. We're looking to restore those budget cuts that we took last year, K-12 and higher education being two of the biggest. We're also excited that we have state dollars to spend to really spark our economy, and then the big federal stimulus package that's on its way here, dollars that are going to help us rebuild, restore, and invest in the right ways to get our economy back on track. And again, as I said, save for the future, put away some dollars in our piggy bank in case we struggle over the next couple of years to get ourselves on track. And so with that, I do want to offer a couple of links where you can find a great deal more information than what I've offered today, both from the governor's office as well as from the legislative council staff. Both provide economic forecasts. You can go to the Joint Budget Committee Budget Overview and Process website for additional info, and I've included my contact info here at the end. So I hope that helps, and happy to answer questions and or just have a conversation.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate the overview and the way that you lay things out. That is the quality that I admire most about you, Julie, is you just have an ability to make complex things sound so simple. So thank you very much for that presentation. I do have one question that I thought you might be able to speak to a little bit more, which is there's two types of stimulus packages coming through. There's some money that we think we're going to be receiving from the federal government, but then there's also some stimulus that Colorado is planning on doing. So could you maybe speak to those two items a little bit? How they are different, and then in particular, why is it that Colorado has ended up being in a position to have these stimulus dollars to be able to push out into our communities?
Great question, Senator Zenzinger, and I will do my best to explain this and certainly invite you and Rep. Titone and Rep. Doherty to jump in as well. So as I mentioned, we ended the fiscal year in June 1920, we ended in a better place than we anticipated. Basically, more revenue came in than we thought we would have to spend this year. Those dollars have been sitting for us in our reserves, in our piggy bank. And as we have kind of let the year unfold, we have realized that there is roughly $700 million there that are one-time dollars, not dollars that we can use for ongoing operating expenses like our public schools or our institutions of higher education or even healthcare. Those are one-time dollars that we ended up with at the end of last year, just more than we thought we'd have. So we're taking those dollars and we're putting them into what we hope will be that catalyst of economic drivers, things like small business investments, investing in childcare or affordable housing efforts, putting dollars aside so that we can help people get back to work, maybe through displaced worker education programs or more work through labor and employment, more dollars to labor and employment to help people get retraining or upskilling so that they can, secure a job that's going to help provide a living wage. And I think that initial infusion of 700 million, I know a bit confusing. People think, oh, well, we've got plenty of money. We really don't. It's 700 million of one-time dollars that we want to invest so people can get back to work. We've also got this big tranche of federal stimulus dollars that are coming in. And while we have just started to see where those dollars can be spent, a great deal of it will be going to unemployment to continue to support those people who have lost their jobs during this time. A lot of it will be designated again for healthcare and childcare and a number of those critical services that the state provides, housing, food, utility assistance. We are hoping dollars are going directly to our public schools and to higher education, but we're hoping that we will be able to take some of those dollars and really tailor them to fit where we are seeing some of our budget gaps right now as we look to next year and the year beyond, so that we're prepared for what may be a rough patch or a difficult time just in maintaining those operating expenses the next 2 years.
And then can you also explain for us a little bit, I get this question all the time, and I used to get it all the time when I was on the Joint Budget Committee, is that how do we fund our public schools? And will that be in this budget or will that come in a different bill perhaps? It's a very leading question, isn't it?
Yes. And you're a pro on school funding, so please jump in with me. There are really two sides of the public schools. I'm not talking about higher education right now, but our K-12 system. Roughly it's $7 billion that go to our public schools. Half of that, not half, some of that comes from local property taxes and some of it comes from state taxes. And the local and state share make up what we call total program for all of our school districts. This year, thanks to you and several other leaders in the House, we are bringing forward a bill that we hope will help equalize that local and state share over the course of probably the next decade or two. But we are trying to make sure, as we had originally designed more than 30 years ago, that local property taxes pay for about half of our public schools and that the state pays for about half. And those dollars come from property taxes, right? What we have seen, particularly since the last recession in 2009 and 10, is that the state was unable to meet its obligations for public school funding. And at that time, we introduced something called the negative factor, or what we call today the budget stabilization factor. That the BS factor, well, in 2019-20, we were able to bring that amount down, that negative factor down. Unfortunately, we had to increase it last year because of our budget challenges. The goal this year is to bring it back down to where it was in 1920 And then certainly, if we can, invest additional dollars into our K-12 system to help our schools during what has probably been the most challenging 12 months of their existence. And you are certainly a strong champion for education. Representative Doherty and Representative Titone, you've been great leaders in the House on this front. We are all committed to making sure that our public schools have the dollars they need to run high quality, world-class education programs, and that our teachers are earning a living wage in the communities where they work. I know we still hold on to those goals, even though we've had a bit of a setback when we've had such a tough time with funding.
Great. Well, thank you for explaining the difference. And from my own experience, we definitely plan for school finance in the budget process. What we do is we create a placeholder in the budget. We go ahead and pass the budget. And then a few weeks later, we actually put some finer details on the School Finance Act. We bring that forward in its own separate bill, where then we lay out the details of that placeholder appropriation that we put forward in the state budget. So we do budget for school finance. We just don't parse out the particulars in the budget. We do that a little bit later when we're able to figure out just how much we're going to be putting towards the budget stabilization factor and so on. So a lot of people want to know right away, why didn't you cover school finance when you passed the budget? And that's why it comes a little bit later in its own bill. We have a couple of questions that have been stacking up in the Q&A. And so the first one that we want to get to is a little bit about a question about climate change. Do we do anything around climate change in the budget?
Wow. Great question. Legislation that is passed, certainly by members of the House and the Senate, that are driving either a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, changes to our energy sector, whether that be incentivizing the use of electric vehicles or new regulations, different regulations on oil and gas or other fossil fuels. Those are a lot of the ways that we have been tackling climate change through the legislature. And yes, a lot of those efforts come with a price tag, come with the requirement for funding. So there isn't a line item in our budget that is for climate action or climate change, but you can find where we are spending dollars for a lot of those different efforts throughout the budget. For people who are particularly interested maybe in a deeper dive on some of those expenditures and appropriations, I might recommend looking both at the Department of Natural Resources. You can look there for a lot of the oil and gas. Colorado's Oil and Gas Commission falls under DNR. You can find information about our energy expenditures, either under the governor's office and the Colorado Energy Office, or some of the different, work efforts and things that we are doing in, say, agriculture or our Department of Agriculture. You can see some of our investments in soil, healthy soils, and some of the movement in different energy uses through those different departments.
So sometimes these ideas get taken up in legislation that is making its way through the process, through the legislature, while we're also trying to hammer out the details of the state budget for all of the departments that are pushing these programs out. How do you reconcile what is existing law and what is a current program with legislation that is making its way through the process that also might be touching on things like climate change?
Yeah, that's the juggling act, actually. As we are going through the figure setting process and we are looking at last year's expenditures and trying to set next year's expenditures, we also try to keep in mind that there is new legislation coming through the chambers and may require a certain amount of money. for those items that may have a larger dollar amount attached. We try to flag those, whether we put a placeholder into our budget where we will set aside dollars, recognizing that a piece of legislation is moving through and we want to create space for that. That's one approach. The other is that as we get into budget balancing next week, once we realize how close we are to balancing the budget, we will try to set aside some dollars specific for legislator initiatives. So, bills that we know are on the horizon. In past years, that has been roughly $20 million that has been put aside for a variety of bills that might be coming through the House and the Senate. And then we allow our colleagues to really prioritize what of those bills and those price tags do they want to see funded? What's a priority for them? And of course, our House members and senators are listening to their constituents, and they're reflecting those priorities from their constituents in the funding choices that they make. Great question.
Yeah, I'll take the next question for you. The question is, any idea how much Jeffco Public Schools will get specifically this year? And how can people find out how that breakdown works?
Great question. As Senator Zenzinger explained, we will put aside funding for our public schools in the School Finance Act. And when we bring the School Finance Act forward, we also do what we call a school district run, so that every single school district can see how much money they are getting from our school finance formula. The formula takes into consideration a number of factors: how many at-risk or students of poverty are in the district, special ed students, students who are English language learners. It takes the cost of living into account, and through a rather, I think it's, if you put the entire form, if you wrote the entire finance formula out, it's 7 pages long. You go through all of that formula, it will spit out for us what each school district will be receiving in funding. At this point, as I said earlier, the goal is to restore all of the cuts that were taken this last year and get us back to 1920 levels. That would be a tremendous success if we can give more money to our public schools. I think there are a number of us that want to see that happen, and hopefully we can. But I think it's also important to note that the federal stimulus money that is coming, there is additional public school money coming that will go directly to school districts, not through the state. Yeah, hooray for sure. Not through the state. It won't be under our purview or our authority, but dollars that will be going directly to school districts. And while there will be some guidance on how those dollars can be used, whether that's in specific COVID response, ongoing needs for facility enhancements, HVAC improvements, personal protective equipment, and or other pandemic response or online virtual learning needs. I hope there's enough flexibility that our schools can really use those dollars in the ways that matter most to them.
Great, and thank you so much for that. I've got the next question I'll read. I read an article about possibly increasing the gas tax this year so that we could make a dent in our transportation backlog. Is that happening?
I will throw this out to all of us. I know that there is a great deal of discussion going on right now. Both Republicans and Democrats are at the table talking about, yes, some increases to fees like our gas tax, as well as some general fund investments to do a transportation package that would be meaningful to the state on both roads and bridges, as well as multimodal or transit needs. I have not seen specifics of this plan, and I will throw this out to my colleagues because they may have at this point. But transportation is one of those areas, just like education, where we are woefully underfunded. We desperately need new sustainable funding streams to help us do what we need to as a state on the transportation front. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to craft a package that Coloradans will support.
So I did put a link in the chat about referencing a Colorado Sun article that sort of, in my mind, outlines what I think the proposal is going to be. Quite frankly, I haven't seen the bill because it hasn't been introduced yet. I have had some conversations with my colleagues that are planning on carrying that bill, and they have been speaking to the media, and they did a little bit of a media Q&A regarding their proposal last week on Thursday, which is why the Colorado Sun was able to report on it. And so I just suggest take a look at that. As all legislation works, it's a process. So just what gets introduced isn't always what passes, and there will be a lot of opportunities to weigh in on that proposal. And when it comes to transportation, it is pretty complex. The central problem that we have with transportation, and I'm excited, there was a question in the chat that was directed to me personally regarding my role on the Transportation and Energy Committee. In the Senate, transportation is paired with energy. And so we take up both of those topics. And in the transportation world, the central issue that we have, quite frankly, is revenue, whether we have an appropriate revenue to address our transportation issues. And Rep. McCluskie could probably speak to this, but in our state budget, we don't actually fund transportation through the general fund. That is a bit of an anomaly. We have used extra revenues in the past in order to address some of the major backlog of transportation projects that we have in our state. But the way that we fund transportation currently is through the gas tax, so which hasn't been raised since 1992, before I could drive. So it's been a while. And so I think what the sponsors are planning on doing, and again, I haven't seen the bill, so this is a little bit of just things that I've grasped through conversation, is that they're looking at the whole gamut of transportation and making sure that it is aligned with our climate change goals. Is it aligned with how transportation is evolving in our state? Is it aligned with our population increases that we've had in Colorado? And is it addressing this revenue question? And so I just encourage you to take a look at the article. If you have feedback, please be sure to get that to us, because I think that proposal will be coming pretty soon.
I'll ask one more question that we had in the chat here. As a state employee, the services we provide have a great impact on the economy. What measures can the legislature take to ensure we keep state employees from leaving, fill vacancies, and ensure we are funding our state public services adequately?
Wow, I love that question. Through the figure setting process, we have an opportunity to invest in the state employee compensation package. And while last year we were unable to give our employees any sort of increase, this year we made a commitment early on to provide a 2.5% salary increase for all state employees. And while I wish we could do even more, and I hope that we can now in the years ahead, we struggle even with the 2.5% and are really hoping we can hold on to that number and not have to pull it back. Last year, for many of our community providers, we took a 1% provider rate reduction. This year, we restored that 1% and we gave them a 1.5% increase. And all of those increases we committed to early on, hoping that we could build the rest of our budget decisions after we made those commitments to employees. The state has more than 60,000 employees, not just in Denver at the state capitol, but all across the state. And we really do value the work that our state employees have been doing we had to take a 5% personal services reduction last year. Departments were allowed to realize that 5% savings through attrition or vacancy by not filling jobs. They did everything they could to protect employees and not lay employees off. We did delay the para direct distribution last year. We suspended that investment. We'll be doing that again this year because we know how important our para package is to state employees, and we want to keep para on a sustainable path moving forward. Health benefits. There was a change in the health insurance provider for the state employees this year, again, to help realize some savings, but still be able to offer a robust health insurance package for all of our employees. And I'm proud of what we've been able to do. I wish it was more. I wish we could, give everyone that 10% raise that they so deserve given the challenges of the time. But I am glad that we've been able to protect jobs and not lay people off during the pandemic.
So this was the type of question that I dreaded receiving when I was on the Joint Budget Committee, but I heard it a lot, so I'm going to repeat it to you. Where do you think we're going to be with the provider rate next this coming budget? So many people rely on that provider rate for many different types of healthcare services. So what do you think the prediction is going to be for that this year?
Yeah, and you're right. That's a tough one, Senator. The restoration of that 1% reduction we took was a top priority for us. We've committed to the 1.5% increase. We hope to hold those provider rates at that 2.5% for this next year. It will depend on what budget balancing looks like next week, but I think that we all value, particularly now, what our home-based providers, home healthcare providers have been dealing with. We found some very creative ways to protect those providers who are serving our individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities this last year. We took some general fund reversions and we were able to do some rate adjustments so that those providers could keep their doors open and continue to serve this very vulnerable population in Colorado. I wish, as you well know, we were on a path to eliminate the waiting list. We have a number of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities who have not been able to get the level of services that they have wanted for, in some cases, years. And they have been on a waiting list. And last year we were prepared to buy down that waiting list to get everyone the services that they have been waiting for. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we couldn't do that. This year, our focus has been on sustainability of our providers, but I hope next year or the year after, we're able to get back to buying down that wait list and getting more people the services they deserve.
So we have about 5 more minutes for your portion, Representative McCluskie. So I just wanted to let everyone know that if you have any questions or any last final thoughts for the representative, this is the moment to tap her budget expertise. And I just wanted to ask you another leading question, which is more personally, what are you looking forward to in this year's budget? Is there a priority that you have that perhaps we were not able to address last year, or a new priority that has come up that you are particularly interested in addressing in this year's budget?
That's kind of an exciting question. Thank you. I ran for office 3 years ago because of my commitment to both public education and higher education, as well as making improvements here on the Western Slope for healthcare affordability and access. Our governor has prioritized the Colorado option, which would be novel, a first in the country in trying to bring more affordable healthcare to citizens. That is still an item in the budget. while we did not set aside or put a placeholder for the dollars that it would take to stand that program up, I'm hopeful that we're going to be able next week to put aside some money so that our legislature can prioritize where they see dollars should be going. And I hope that the Colorado option will be one of those investments. I also think, you know, as I look at our budget, and really proud with how we are trying to restore the reductions we took. I think childcare and early childhood services, both education as well as healthcare, have to be a priority for us right now, because we know for moms and dads to get back to work, they have got to have high quality childcare options available. And during the special session in December, we put some money aside to keep doors open at childcare facilities. I think this is another opportunity through this year's budget and also the Fed stimulus to continue those investments so that we build that early childhood infrastructure and make sure that working families have access to that care so they can get back to work and you know, provide for their family.
All good
Great
things.
Yes, all good things, all good things.
So while we have you here and we have your undivided attention as three legislators who also have particular priorities in the budget, I just want to share with you, and then I'll let Representative Doherty and Representative Titone follow what I would like to see in this year's upcoming budget. I will say that for me, one of the hardest things last year were the cuts to higher education, because it always comes second. You know, we prioritize K-12 education, and that was definitely very difficult. But the federal government did a really good job of trying to give us some stimulus dollars for K-12, and they did try to help us with higher education as well. But in my mind, I think that is one of the areas of our budget that I'm most concerned about recovering from this pandemic. We were already in such a bad place with regard to higher education funding in our state. So for me, that's something that I hope that we are definitely able to address this coming year, get us back at the very least to where we were in 2019, but then maybe also think about how this pandemic has affected students and our new high school graduates and those that are looking at post-secondary options. And we're trying to make progress in that area. We're trying to get more kids interested in post-secondary education, and so that we can prepare them for the jobs that we know are going to need that credential. So for me, that is something that I hope that we can address in the budget. And then Rep. Titone, what's your wish list?
Well, I mean, thanks for that question. You know, I serve on the Joint Technology Committee. I'm the vice chair there. And we recommended that all of the higher education projects that we've been kicking the can down the road for a few years now. And, you know, I was really happy to see that the Joint Budget Committee actually approved all of those. So I appreciate that. Thank you. You know, we need to be competitive with other states. And, you know, when we have that cut in higher education all around, and we can't catch up on any level of higher education, when at least we can keep up with the technology, our students can feel like they're being able to participate in the ways that everyone else can, and feel like they're getting the best, highest quality education from a technology perspective. So I really appreciated that. We have always hated to see those projects get cut. And last year was a particularly bad year. We were hoping to get some through, but you came through for us with that respect. So I appreciate that very much.
Rep. Titone, I have to say your leadership on the Joint Technology Committee is so important and so valuable. So thank you. Your voice during our budget making decision process was extremely helpful. And you, I think the reason so many of those projects passed was because you were there. So thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for having me there to explain it from our perspective.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of echo what I've heard too. Education is really important to me. pretty much all of the bills I have this session have to do with kids and giving kids, the best shot at a good future that they possibly can have. I think I'm just passionate about that because I've seen so many kids growing up in these tough family positions. And I think the more we can help them be successful despite any lack of support at home, the better everyone's going to be. And so that's what I will always continue to fight for. And so, two of the programs that I think are really important are obviously that foster youth and transition bill that Senator Zenzinger and I are doing, and then the suicide prevention intervention that will have a grant program in there as well. So those are always the issues I will advocate for and continue to advocate for. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Doherty. I thank you for lifting up behavioral health. It is a dire need. We see it in all of our communities, and thank you for being a champion on that front, as well as for children. Obviously, this has been so difficult for working families, and everything we can do to support our kids through this time is just critical. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me today. This was great fun, and I hope to come back and visit again soon.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. We really appreciate all of your expertise. I will note that I believe the state legislature is going to be opening up the conversation to all Coloradans to weigh in on that $700 million Colorado stimulus plan. We are really wanting to hear from you about how we should prioritize those dollars. I think there's going to be an announcement about this coming up on Monday, and I think it will, we're going to try and push out different ways that the general public can weigh in on those stimulus dollars. I want to say thank you to Rep. McCluskie because the Joint Budget Committee opened up this process, the budget process, to the general public too. And this is a rather new practice to open up and actually have a public hearing on the budget, giving people an opportunity to weigh in and say what it is that they want us to prioritize in that budget. And I do know that Rep. McCluskie really takes those conversations to heart, does a great job of listening, not only to her own community, but all of Colorado. And so thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate. If you have additional questions for Rep. McCluskie about the budget, I believe she placed her contact information in the chat, but she can do it once more, just so that it's at the end of the thread here. And if you have any upcoming questions as the budget talks firm up this week, this is kind of a critical week for the budget. This is when they will do the balancing component and make all the hard decisions to make sure that Colorado produces a balanced budget like we do every year. So thank you so much for your participation today.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you
So
so
in
much.
the last few minutes here, we are just going to do some quick announcements. Please don't forget to join us for our town hall next month. Our topic at this point is TBD, but we will definitely keep you informed. That presentation will be virtual once more. I think we're getting very close to rounding up our virtual presentations, and we're hoping that by this summer we might be able to actually start having our town halls in person once again. So that date is April 17th. It's the third Saturday, and it will be once more a virtual presentation beginning at 10:30. So I hope that you will all join us. And with that, I will kick it over to Rep. Titone.
All right, thanks very much. I'm going to put my stuff in the chat here, all my information, how to find me, how to get a hold of me. Don't forget, on Monday afternoon, we're going to be talking about the right to repair bill on Twitter. We're going to answer any questions you have there. You can also sign up for my newsletter. We'll be sending out a newsletter this weekend for this week. And on that, you will see a sign up for office hours. We want to make sure people have some access to chat with me, so you can sign up for office hours there and set up a time to chat. So, and then, if you want to track my bills, I put a link there to the page on the legislative website that will show you all the bills that I have. And you can look at each one of those, where it is in the process, when the committee hearings are going to be, and if you want to sign up for testimony on those, you could do it remotely, which is always a nice way to do that. So take part in the process if you have a passion about the bill. So that's all I have to say about that. Thanks.
All right, and yep, as you heard, we'll have another town hall TBD next month. Hopefully we'll be able to see you all in person at some point. I'd love that. I put some info in the chat, my phone number, my email address. Please feel free to sign up for my newsletter that goes out weekly every Wednesday. And then we have resources on my website, www.lindsayforcolorado.com as well. So feel free to check that out. Please get in touch with me if you have any issues or anything like that. So, and with that being said, I think we have,
I have a quick announcement.
Go ahead.
So I forgot that next month we will be joined by Congressman Ed Perlmutter. He's going to be doing a very short presentation, just updating the community about the federal stimulus package that was just passed through Congress. So he's going to be joining us briefly for our next town hall, just to give us an update on some of that package.
All right, great. Well, with that being said, thank you everyone so much for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. It's beautiful outside, so get outside and get some sunshine. And we will see you next month. Thanks, everyone.